What? 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 That's what I mean! That's the trouble with you. That's the trouble with ye. With you! With ye! No! No! I want a steak! I want a goddamn steak!
Aspect ratio is a fascinating aspect of filmmaking that can achieve some amazing feats within this visual medium. It could present some stunning imagery for the viewer, help them claw their way into the character's head, and it can even manage to evoke some kind of emotion out of you. But the weird thing is, there seems to be an odd forbidden fruit quality to this tool. Sure, there was The Passion of Joan of Arc in 1928, which presented scenes in a 1:3:1 ratio to allow characters' faces to fill up a larger portion of the frame. Or Comradeship in 1931, which filmed in a 1:9:1 ratio to help aid the feeling of being trapped in a mine right there along with the characters. For context, these ratios previously stated are simply the frame's width compared to its height. So, by technicality, The Passion of Joan of Arc is actually slightly wider than Comradeship. Sadly, the stigma surrounding this technique has largely kept it away from the many films being made throughout the years. Everyone pretty much just filmed at the exact same ratio, with a few exceptions sprinkled in here and there. That is, until the 2010s decided to spark the inspiration of a decent amount of aspect ratio uses within film. One major advantage of deviating from the typical ratio is the ability to frame scenes in a unique and fresh way. It's still very much possible to present breathtaking cinematography from the typical ratio, but when you change the size of the frame, it manages to open up a whole world of possibilities. The Grand Budapest Hotel utilizes this perfectly with its cinematography. Wes Anderson is notorious for loving symmetry more than his wife and kids, so this 1:3:7:1 ratio that most of the movie is filmed in really allowed him to fulfill his wildest fantasies. The square frame calls for symmetry to be much more prominent than usual, and combined with the inescapable right angles, every frame in this film really pops in a way that would be hard to replicate in the standard ratio. There are even some shots where the frame is impressively symmetrical in two lines rather than just the one. But the real testament to this film's use of aspect ratio is the many changes that it undergoes throughout. Along with the previously mentioned 1:3:7:1 ratio, the film also includes scenes with a 1:8:5:1 and even a 2:4:0:1. And rather than just being a flippant stylization, this decision is actually a very purposeful one. There are 3 different time periods that compose a timeline of the film, and Wes decided it would be a good idea to mimic the popular ratios used in each real-life time period. 1932 is shot in the old-timey Academy ratio, 1968 is shot in the grungy CinemaScope ratio, and present day is shot in the modern widescreen ratio that's used today. Along with being a huge improvement to the overall look of the film, this purpose allowed me to have a much better appreciation for these quick changes and kept them from being distracting. And while the changes here happened between cuts, some filmmakers have resulted in changing the ratio within the actual scene. It Comes at Night follows a family of 3 as they isolate themselves in the woods from a deadly virus that's infecting the outside world. The main character Travis is traumatized by the paranoia and fear of his current situation, which causes visceral nightmares to plague him in his sleep. The film is mainly presented in a 2:4:0:1 widescreen ratio until these nightmares begin to show themselves. As the figurative world begins to close in on our character, so too do the top and bottom black bars until the ratio is now a solid 275/1. This change is consistent for each nightmare, and at first it doesn't seem to have much purpose in the actual story. The initial family was kind enough to let in another wandering group of survivors, until one of them became infected with the highly contagious virus. During this confrontation, the aspect ratio slowly shifts to a 3/1. As the conflict ensues, bloody and violent happenings begin to form right in front of the main character, but Travis doesn't seem to be having any sort of nightmare. This change in ratio signifies that Travis's real life has now become just as awful, if not worse, than his terrifying night terrors. He had become so attached to this family who had been staying with them for weeks now, and he had just witnessed them being brutally murdered right before his very eyes. This aspect ratio then stays at the tight 3/1 until the end of the movie, showing that all hope has withered away in this apocalyptic scenario. It seems apparent that it would be rather difficult to evoke some kind of positive emotion from the audience using this technique. When you restrict the viewer's line of sight through shifting the black bars closer together, it is a rather inconvenient viewing experience. That is, unless we could find a way to change the ratio for the better. Mommy is a film about a poor mother taking custody of her mentally ill son in an attempt to help him get back on his feet. Mommy is also a film that boasts a horrendous 1/1 aspect ratio throughout most of the runtime, and it is quite an uncomfortable mode of viewing the events on screen. The intense feeling of claustrophobia is palpable throughout here, and what makes matters worse is that this film is incredibly realistic and down to earth. When you present a movie with such well-written characters and story in this way, it makes it all the more uncomfortable with how unnatural it is. These black bars on each side make the movie a complete pain to sit through, similar to how the son is a complete pain to care for. Throughout his time living with the mother, he proves to be unruly and immature with little to no hope of reason. He spends his time constantly making inappropriate remarks and performing inappropriate actions, while also violently lashing out in unpredictable moments. But somewhere in the middle of their ventures together, a fleeting sliver of hope begins to show itself as things begin to lighten up. The son is finally listening to his tutor, and the mother begins to find steady work around her neighborhood. The characters start to joyfully celebrate their accomplishments, and something miraculous happens. The heavy weight has finally been lifted off of the characters' backs, and in turn also been lifted from the viewers as well. The creators of this film took the negative emotion that comes from tightening the ratio and reversed it to give us a powerful moment of hope within this depressing story. You immediately feel a sense of freedom and vigor as soon as the widescreen reveals itself, and the characters are obviously feeling the exact same as you. But soon after, some bad news arrives at the door, and as soon as the real world starts to set back in again, so does the uncomfortable and claustrophobic ratio, showing that these triumphant moments may manage to surface in scarce situations, but they will never compose our day-to-day life, replacing the pain and suffering that we all experience on this earth. Well, now that we've thoroughly dissected many good uses of aspect ratio and everyone is now thoroughly depressed, I think it's about time that we move on to some hilariously bad uses of aspect ratio. Because while there are many more examples of good ratio usage out there, there are a few bad ratio usages that make me appreciate the previous examples even more. Defy Bloods is a Spike Lee joint that follows a group of Vietnam veterans as they travel back to the Vietnam jungle in order to recover some buried gold as well as their friends' remains. The film actually plays around with a few different aspect ratios, and some of them do manage to hit the mark. But in the exact same movie, Spike Lee managed to miss the same mark by 239/1 feet. At least that's the ratio he should have stuck with, because this screen format used in the first hour of the movie suddenly switches to a jarring 1:8:5:1 as soon as the characters enter the actual jungle. But my head became so unbearably itchy just trying to think of a reason why this change was purposeful in the slightest. Are you trying to say that these PTSD-stricken war veterans feel freer and more alive when they enter this graveyard of fallen soldiers? Or that their friendship becomes stronger and healthier as they all confront their demons together? When we hit the jungle, we wanted the jungle to overwhelm them. This big, wide, sort of all-encompassing environment is a clarification said by Newton Thomas Sigel, director of photography for Da 5 Bloods. So now I understand what they were going for, but it's really not conveyed that well in the actual film. A thought like that never came within 10 feet of my mind while watching this movie, mainly because no other filmmaking element really helps to boost this effect of overwhelming the characters. A good fix would have been to have an abundance of shots taken far away, where the characters appear much smaller than the environment around them. That way, you could actually take advantage of the new ratio and make the purpose much more prevalent at the same time. There are definitely a couple of establishing shots that come across as if they're trying to achieve this effect, but it's really just not enough. Although, it is very respectable that there was at least an attempt to emulate some aspect of the story through ratio changes, no matter how unsuccessful. But I swear to God, there are some filmmakers who come across as if they have absolutely no clue about what they're doing. Lucy in the Sky is a film, and one that has some abysmal aspect ratio choices at that. The film opens up with our space-crazy main character who's just floating around in ecstasy, and the ratio in this sequence is a decent 1:8:5:1 widescreen, but then right as she returns to Earth, it changes to a 1:33:1. So I'm like, okay, good on you, Mr. Filmmaker. You've managed to somewhat capture the main character's feelings of being more alive during her space expeditions. But then as the movie progresses, those black bars start going for quite a wild ride. Woo! That's how you do it. Yes! Come on, baby, let's go. You call that aspect ratio change? Move it, son. Go. You got it. Keep on going. That's how you do it. You gotta get all the way there, all the way to the edge. Gosh, the scene is so boring right now. I wish that there was some way that the filmmakers could make it visually interesting. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about! I don't know what caused this editor to have a violent seizure while working on the film, but I hope it never happens again, because this great migration of letterboxing is just not okay. It comes across as if whoever was in charge of these decisions wanted to use aspect ratio to stylize the look of the film, similar to how Edgar Wright uses quick editing to aid his style. But the problem here is that shifting the aspect ratio is such a radical change to the viewing experience that it's almost impossible to use it in this way without being distracting. Especially not in a drama like this. I mean, if this was used in a comedy as a constant punchline or something, yeah, it'd still be a little annoying. But it wouldn't completely obliterate my investment in the movie, because it's just a dumb, stupid comedy. But this movie is presenting a pretty serious tone and story that needs some investment for me to even remotely care about anything that happens in the third act. Investment that is thoroughly obliterated when you cram the fact that this is a movie down my throat through these constant changes. And of course, none of this has any purpose whatsoever. Like, can someone please tell me the purpose of this shot? Or how about this one? Please, for the love of God, I've been trying to figure out this one for weeks now, and the answer just seems to have been avoiding me like the plague this whole time, because I can't even fathom how any of this could have a single ounce of purpose in it. Okay, well, I guess that's enough ranting for today. Hope you all enjoyed hearing me act like a pretentious film student while talking about aspect ratio. Sorry if this is a bit different from my usual video format. I just wanted to give the video essay a try and see how it worked out. It was pretty neat, and I had fun making this. Anyways, thanks a ton for watching. Hopefully it won't take me 3 weeks to post the next video.